The chamber of the Galactic Council looked like it had been designed by an architect who had skimmed a book on human cathedrals and thought, yes, but shinier. Towers of crystalline alloy arched above a floor of living marble that pulsed faintly like a beating heart. Dozens of species sat in their respective galleries, draped in layers of ceremonial robes, ornamental feathers, and metallic insignia that screamed more about ego than diplomacy. The air was heavy with perfumed vapors meant to calm delegates, though they smelled suspiciously like burnt licorice. The council had convened for what they proudly called the Peace Summit that will civilize humanity, their collective hubris filling the chamber louder than any speech could. They were ready to deliver humanity into the folds of order, discipline, and above all, predictability. Unfortunately for them, they were about to learn the fatal difference between theory and practice. When the humans finally arrived, they didn't march in with somber expressions and coordinated uniforms like the council expected. Instead, the heavy doors creaked open to the pounding beat of Eye of the Tiger, booming from what appeared to be an actual 1980s boombox precariously balanced on the shoulder of a grinning Marine. Behind him shuffled the rest of the Earth delegation. A handful of diplomats in wrinkled suits, a couple of scientists still scribbling notes on notepads, 3 Marines chewing gum in perfect synchronization, and one exhausted-looking NASA engineer wearing a t-shirt that read, "Houston, we have a problem." The chamber fell silent. Aliens blinked with eye stalks, gills, and bioluminescent lids. The humans kept walking as if they were late for a party rather than the galaxy's most sacred assembly. Ambassador Vaynar of the Triumvirate was the first to break the silence, his voice sharp as crystal chimes. "Humans, you were scheduled to arrive 37 standard units ago. Punctuality is the foundation of diplomacy." The Marine with the boombox, Sergeant O'Connor, though nobody here seemed brave enough to ask his name, paused mid-chew and smirked. "Yeah, well, we were stuck in traffic. Space traffic. Real mess out there. Someone parked their dreadnought sideways across the wormhole." The humans laughed. The aliens did not. Leading the delegation was Ambassador Elena Torres, a woman whose patience was legendary back on Earth, but about to be tested beyond its limits. She scanned the hall, her dark eyes catching the mix of disdain and barely concealed curiosity in the alien faces. With a steady voice, she said, "We're here. Shall we begin?" What followed could generously be called a clash of civilizations. The council representatives began to drone through their proposed accords of civil conduct. Every sentence dripped with the assumption that humanity's rough edges needed sanding down. No more wars of aggression. No more primitive nationalism. No more sports that encourage violence. In fact, no more football at all. That was the first time O'Connor dropped his gum. "Wait, did you just outlaw football?" he said, his voice loud enough to echo across the chamber. A reptilian delegate clicked his jaws. "Football is barbaric. Civilized species do not solve disputes with bone-crushing collisions." Torres pinched the bridge of her nose. She had told her team, repeatedly, to keep their comments to themselves. But it was no use. Another Marine, Private Jacobs, leaned forward and muttered, "If they take away football, they'll never survive Philly on game day." Dr. Malik, the NASA engineer, added dryly, "Without football, you're looking at a collapse of entire beer-based economies." The aliens blinked, confused, muttering among themselves. Next came restrictions on music. Humans, they said, must surrender their weaponized auditory art forms, namely heavy metal and rap, which the council believed disrupted the brainwaves of more delicate species. "Hold up," O'Connor said again, practically vibrating in his seat. "You're telling me we can't blast Metallica at full volume during a space battle? What's the point of fighting then?" Council murmurs turned uneasy. These humans weren't debating, they were mocking. Torres tried to smooth things over. "We appreciate your concern, but human culture is complex. Music, sports, and even our energetic disagreements, they're woven into who we are." Ambassador Vaynar's shimmering eyes narrowed. "Culture must bend to order. Chaos cannot be permitted to spread unchecked." Jacobs grinned and whispered just loud enough for the chamber to hear, "Buddy, chaos is our export product." The chamber buzzed with tension. Delegates shifted, feathers rustled, gills flared. The council had expected humility, even gratitude. What they got was irreverence. Torres stood. Her voice cut through the noise. "We came here in good faith, ready to find common ground. But if you ask us to abandon the very things that make us human, then these peace talks are nothing more than a performance." The room froze. The humans rose in unison. Even the boombox Marine turned down the music. Torres's face softened into something dangerously close to pity. "We'll give you one piece of advice. Stop pushing, or Earth stops pretending to be civilized." Her words landed like a thunderclap. The aliens stared, uncomprehending. Civilized? Pretending? The humans were bluffing, surely. They had to be. But before any rebuttal could be voiced, the Earth delegation turned and walked out. The sound of their footsteps faded until only the humming of the chamber remained. The silence was shattered by a small voice from one of the younger delegates, a species barely out of pre-warp infancy. Why would they need to pretend? No one answered. Vaynar's crystalline features twitched with the first flicker of unease. The Council had dismissed humanity as a volatile but ultimately containable species. Now, a shadow of doubt spread through the chamber like ink in water. Because what if humanity wasn't bluffing? "Do you want me to continue straight into Section 2 in full? Almost equals 1,200 words. Next, keeping the same mix of thrilling tension and humor, or would you like to pause and refine Section 1's pacing and character balance first?" The chamber's silence had been heavy when the humans walked out, but the weeks that followed carried a weight far worse: the silence of absence. Humanity, once dismissed as a volatile novelty, had stepped away from the Council's carefully staged performance, and now the galaxy was beginning to discover how deeply it had woven Earth's chaos into its veins. Ambassador Torres, back on Earth, followed the reports with grim satisfaction. Trade networks sputtered. Entire economies stalled when the flow of human goods halted. Coffee, once mocked as bean juice by a sneering delegate, was suddenly the most valuable substance in the galaxy. Planetary administrators accustomed to sipping it before dawn negotiations now found themselves sluggish, irritable, and shockingly unproductive. A minor rebellion flared on the RYYK homeworld when their governors attempted to substitute a local root brew. The mobs chanted for real caffeine or no peace. Even stranger was the collapse of entertainment markets. For all their arrogance, the Council had let Earth's music, television, and movies spread unchecked, assuming they would fade like other, primitive amusements. Instead, they had become cultural bedrock. When shipments ceased, audiences rioted. Alien teenagers plastered "Bring Back Backstreet Boys" across city walls in glowing graffiti. Colonies petitioned for Seinfeld reruns as though their stability depended on it. And in a way it did. Without laughter, without rhythm, their days grew gray. What was once dismissed as trivial was now revealed as essential. Torres knew this would happen. She had seen the Council's smugness for what it was, fear disguised as superiority. But even she had not expected the unraveling to happen so quickly. Sitting in a modest office in Washington, she listened to Dr. Malik rattle off intercepted transmissions, each one more absurd than the last. Council scientists tried to reverse-engineer coffee, Malik reported, tapping his datapad with a smirk. They got something close, but it caused mass hallucinations. Half a fleet swore they saw the sun explode. Another half danced until their limbs locked. Sergeant O'Connor, sprawled on a chair with his eternal boombox resting on one knee, laughed until he choked. "Guess they can't handle the dark roast." Torres folded her arms, watching them with weary fondness. "It's not funny. The more desperate they get, the more dangerous they'll become." "Dangerous?" O'Connor shot back. "We've been dangerous since the day we left caves with sticks. They just didn't notice until we brought Metallica along." On the Council's side, the atmosphere grew frantic. Delegates who once carried themselves like royalty now bickered like frightened children. Efforts to mimic human inventions became a string of disasters. Attempts to create video game consoles accidentally destabilized wormhole relays. Experimental rock music collapsed a symposium hall when sound waves shattered its crystalline frame. Worst of all, sarcasm remained utterly beyond them. An alien general, confused by the phrase "break a leg," ordered his soldiers to literally do so. The result was a demoralized army and a reputation for tragic idiocy. The cracks in their superiority widened when humanity's fleets began appearing at the edges of Council space. Officially, they were patrolling. Unofficially, they were flexing. Destroyers cruised brazenly close to alien borders, their hulls painted with irreverent slogans like Millennium Falcon Fan Club and Property of Nobody. Pilots broadcast Bon Jovi into the void at deafening volume, their signals impossible to jam. One admiral, desperate to reassert control, ordered an interception. The encounter should have been a simple show of force. Council fleets outclassed human ships by centuries. But the battle reports stunned everyone. Human captains outmaneuvered their opponents with reckless, almost gleeful disregard for doctrine. A frigate disabled 3 cruisers by slingshotting an asteroid. A carrier group collapsed under the assault of a digital virus that replaced its tactical screens with looping images of a man in sunglasses endlessly dancing. When the council demanded explanations, the admirals stammered. They could not explain how ships patched with duct tape and ingenuity had dismantled forces 10 times stronger. They could not explain why human marines fought as though war was a game, laughing as they advanced. And they could not explain why none of their training prepared them for an enemy that weaponized unpredictability itself. Back on Earth, Torres held the reports with a frown. The victories emboldened her marines, who treated them like practice runs. O'Connor, when asked how he had routed 3 alien squadrons with half a dozen ships, shrugged. You ever seen Top Gun? Same playbook, just with asteroids. The council, meanwhile, turned on itself. Delegates who had once mocked humanity's volatility now accused one another of cowardice. Some demanded concessions to Earth, others demanded war. But war required discipline, and discipline was evaporating. Alien teenagers blasted pirated human music in the streets. Citizens formed black markets trading for contraband chocolate bars and ancient sitcom recordings. Even council staff were caught smuggling coffee beans, their eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Ambassador Cyril, one of the few voices of caution, rose during an emergency session. Her tendrils quivered as she addressed the chamber. They warned us. They said they were pretending. What if this is what they held back? What if the mask was never weakness but mercy? The words rippled like a shockwave. Some scoffed, too afraid to admit the truth. But others fell into uneasy silence, remembering fragments of history long buried, rumors of empires erased after provoking Earth millennia ago, warnings dismissed as myth. Torres could feel the galaxy tipping. From her office, she watched feeds of alien protests swelling into riots, their chants now eerily human in cadence. We want coffee. We want music. We want Earth. She turned to Malik. They're unraveling faster than I thought. The council's losing control. Malik adjusted his glasses, his smile thin. They built an empire on order. We brought them chaos. And now they're addicted. Torres leaned back, her eyes hardening. Addiction makes people dangerous. On cue, O'Connor's boombox blared, filling the office with the opening riff of Welcome to the Jungle. He grinned without shame. Yeah, but it also makes them beg. Torres allowed herself the faintest of smiles, but it didn't last. She knew the council's pride would not vanish quietly. Desperation could lead to peace, but it could also ignite something far darker. Humanity had walked away, but the galaxy was still chasing. And she feared what might happen when the council finally realized that the humans they had dismissed were not waiting to be civilized at all. They were ready to stop pretending. In the council's grand chamber, Vaynar sat alone after another failed session, fissures spidering deeper across his crystalline frame. The whispers of his aides echoed in his head, words he had tried to bury. Do not provoke Earth. The last time, entire empires vanished. And as he stared at the empty space where the humans had once sat, he felt the chilling weight of a realization that silenced even his pride. Would you like me to now expand Section 3 to 1,200 words with the same level of focus and character development as this one, since the current draft was tighter and shorter? The council's fractured order collapsed into full-blown chaos. Their attempts to reassert dominance only sharpened the contrast between their brittle pride and humanity's infuriating resilience. At first, they tried intimidation, grand fleets dispatched to hover menacingly near human colonies, political broadcasts filled with rhetoric about discipline and order. But the broadcasts were hacked before they even aired, replaced by humans inserting laugh tracks and reruns of The Simpsons. Instead of inspiring fear, the council became a galaxy-wide joke. Ambassador Torres sat at her desk in Washington, scanning intercepted reports while the glow of the Capitol dome flickered outside her window. Dr. Malik leaned against the wall, adjusting his glasses with deliberate calm, though his smirk betrayed a certain satisfaction. Sergeant O'Connor sprawled on the couch, tapping his boots against the armrest in rhythm with the song blaring from his boombox, Don't Stop Believin'. They tried sanctions today, Torres said, her voice flat. Banned human goods from all ports. O'Connor snorted. What like that's going to work? They've got their own citizens smuggling chocolate bars in their shoes. If they outlaw Twinkies, they'll have an armed rebellion on their hands by Friday. Malik added without looking up, a rebellion already started on the ZYRK colony. They rioted when shipments of instant noodles ran dry. Whole administration building toppled. Torres pinched the bridge of her nose. This isn't funny. Sure it is, O'Connor said, raising the volume. You just gotta laugh before you cry. But Torres wasn't laughing. Each intercepted transmission painted the same picture: unrest, confusion, and a council losing legitimacy faster than anyone had thought possible. She had expected tension. She hadn't expected collapse. The humans had walked away to prove a point, but the point was spiraling into something larger than even she had imagined. On the other side of the stars, Vaynar could feel his control slipping like sand through brittle fingers. In the council chamber, delegates screamed over one another, accusing, blaming, panicking. His crystalline body pulsed with angry light as he pounded his staff against the floor. Silence. This assembly will remember its dignity. But there was no dignity left. One delegate waved a data pad, its hologram showing alien youths in neon paint chanting lyrics from an Earth song. Another slammed the table, demanding Earth's immediate submission. A third, smaller voice suggested negotiation, only to be shouted down with venom. The Council's attempt to project dominance had backfired spectacularly. Their fleets, so mighty on paper, suffered humiliation after humiliation at human hands. Skirmishes were recorded, replayed, and laughed at across the galaxy. A squadron of Council warships had been outmaneuvered by a single human corvette broadcasting highway to the danger zone over every comm channel. Another fleet had been rendered blind when human hackers replaced their tactical overlays with looping footage of dancing cats. Each loss carried weight far beyond the battlefield. Citizens, already restless, mocked their leaders. Soldiers, once unquestioning, began to doubt. And beneath the mockery lurked a terrifying truth the Council could no longer deny. Humans weren't improvising out of desperation. They were holding back. Torres could feel it too, though in her bones rather than her thoughts. She had spent years negotiating, smiling through clenched teeth, trying to show the galaxy a humanity that could play nice. But now that the masks were slipping, she saw the same question in every alien report and every human briefing. What happens if Earth stops pretending altogether? One evening, Malik dropped a file on her desk with a grim expression. They're not just desperate anymore. They're planning something. The file contained surveillance of a secret meeting between Council admirals. Though the audio was fragmented, the intent was clear. They were preparing a massive strike, something decisive, something meant to remind the galaxy who ruled. They think they can scare us back into the chamber, Malik said. O'Connor grinned, tossing popcorn into his mouth. Good luck with that. They ever seen Independence Day? Big flashy ships don't always work out so well. Torres didn't answer. Her mind was already racing ahead, weighing options. If the Council truly lashed out, civilians would pay the price. The galaxy's fragile balance could shatter. And yet, pulling humanity back into peace talks now would only reinforce the Council's arrogance. Meanwhile, alien worlds unraveled further. On RYYK, a popular movement began spray-painting murals of human cultural icons, Bruce Willis, Michael Jordan, Madonna, treating them as revolutionary symbols. Entire colonies went on strike, refusing to work unless Earth goods returned. The Council sent enforcers, but enforcers who hadn't tasted coffee in weeks were sluggish, brittle, and often bought off with smuggled chocolate. Vaynar convened another session, his voice a thunderclap of fury. We will not be ruled by primitive anarchists. We are the Council. We are order itself. But the chamber barely listened. Half the delegates were already distracted by smuggled human music echoing faintly from their devices. Order was gone, replaced by the creeping, undeniable realization that the galaxy wanted what Earth had. Back on Earth, Torres's office buzzed with tension. Malik's calm demeanor was slipping, replaced by sharper edges. O'Connor cracked jokes, but even he couldn't mask the restless energy humming beneath his skin. Every report brought them closer to confrontation none of them had wanted, yet all of them had expected. Late at night, alone at her desk, Torres thought of the moment humanity had walked away from the Council chamber. She had wondered then if it had been the right choice, if defiance would cost them everything. Now she saw that choice for what it was, a mirror, one the Council had been too arrogant to look into. Humanity hadn't abandoned peace, they had simply refused to beg for it. And now, as fleets maneuvered and rebellion spread, the mirror was shattering. The next morning, Malik strode into her office with fresh intelligence. His voice was steady, but his eyes glinted with warning. They're moving. Vaynar has ordered a strike force to assemble. They're calling it a demonstration of authority. Targets are still classified, but if I had to guess, they're coming here. O'Connor sat up, his grin sharp and dangerous. Finally, took him long enough. He slapped the boombox, cueing up another track. Thunderstruck began to fill the room. Time to show them the encore. Torres stared at the glowing reports, her chest tight with equal parts dread and determination. The Council's mistake was no longer theoretical. It was about to become very real. And somewhere deep in her bones, she knew, when humanity finally stopped pretending, the galaxy would never be the same. Would you like me to now expand this Section 3 draft to the full 1,200 words, weaving in even more vivid alien perspectives, banter, and escalating stakes, or keep it at this tight pace? The Galactic Council had not convened in such desperation in living memory. The chamber that once rang with smug certainty now quivered under the weight of fear. Gone were the ornamental robes and polished speeches. Most delegates stumbled in sleepless, their finery creased, their feathers or scales dulled by anxiety. For weeks the galaxy had spun further into disorder, entire systems rioting over the absence of Earth's exports. The Council could no longer deny it. Without humanity, their carefully maintained order was collapsing like glass under a hammer. Vaynar, once the unshakable voice of crystalline logic, rose to speak. His frame bore fissures, fine cracks that ran like spiderwebs through his once pristine surface. Each word shimmered with a brittle timbre. We must appeal to them, not as overlords, not as teachers, as supplicants. The chamber erupted in mutters, half outrage, half relief. Some still resisted, unwilling to bow to the species they had once called primitive. But resistance was a luxury they could no longer afford. Even the most prideful delegates had seen the protests, the black markets, the chaos. Even they had heard the chants, "Bring back the humans." And so, with no ceremony, the Council drafted an invitation. A plea disguised as protocol. They begged Earth to return to the table. When the humans arrived, they did not come in the manner the Council remembered. No suits, no polite masks of diplomacy. Instead, the doors of the chamber swung open to the rattling chords of nirvana, pumped through some absurd human contraption that shook the very walls. Ambassador Torres led the delegation again, but she was different now. Gone was the restrained diplomat cautiously balancing pride and patience. Her expression was sharp, weary, and utterly resolute. Behind her walked O'Connor with his ever-present boombox, Jacobs carrying a football under one arm like it was a weapon, and Dr. Malik juggling a datapad and a battered VHS tape, labeled Die Hard. They were not pretending anymore. The Council rose instinctively, not in honor but in dread. Torres let the silence stretch until it ached. Then she spoke. "You thought we would crawl back. You thought you could strip us of what makes us human and leave us hollow. But you've seen now. We don't bend. We don't break. And we sure as hell don't crawl." One delegate, desperate to salvage dignity, croaked, "We admit miscalculation. But your people, your chaos, it spreads like infection. It destabilizes everything." O'Connor laughed outright, his voice echoing off the crystalline walls. "You wanted us housebroken. Turns out you adopted a pack of wolves." Torres's eyes swept the chamber. "We asked nicely. You mocked us. We walked away. Now you beg us back. So listen closely, this is your last chance." She nodded to Malik, who tapped his datapad. The chamber's massive screens flickered alive. What the aliens saw defied their comprehension. A recording of humans crammed into a Walmart at dawn, surging through doors with primal howls for discounted televisions. Footage of Philadelphia Eagles fans climbing lampposts and overturning cars in celebration of victory. A time-lapse of a 90s LAN party, dozens of humans unwashed, sleepless, and euphoric as they battled each other in pixelated arenas for 3 days straight. And then the kicker, Florida Man news clippings scrolling endlessly, each headline more bizarre than the last. The chamber dissolved into gasps, shrieks, and fainting fits. Vaynar's crystalline frame trembled audibly. A delegate from the aquatic Oris species actually curled into a puddle on the floor. The message was clear. If this was what humanity looked like when restrained by the thin veneer of civilization, what horrors lay beneath if they truly unleashed themselves? Still, pride dies slowly. A cluster of delegates, humiliated and furious, summoned their guards. "This cannot continue. We will not kneel to savages." Their soldiers stepped forward, weapons raised. The chamber descended into chaos. Torres did not flinch. She looked to O'Connor. "Show them." With a grin, the Marine hit play on his boombox. Out blared Bon Jovi's "Livin' on a Prayer" at maximum volume. The human Marines moved like predators unleashed, charging with nothing but jury-rig gear, duct tape, and an almost gleeful disregard for standard tactics. They sang along as they fought, fists and improvised weapons moving to the beat. Jacobs hurled his football with such force it shattered an alien rifle. Malik hacked the Council's security systems mid-battle using technology older than most delegates, weaponizing dial-up screeches until enemy comms melted in static. It was chaos, it was absurd, and it was utterly unstoppable. The Council guards, highly trained and equipped with centuries of doctrine, collapsed in minutes. They had no countermeasure for humans who treated combat like sport, who laughed as they fought, who used karaoke as sonic warfare. The chamber floor was a wreck of smoking weapons and groaning soldiers before the last notes of Bon Jovi faded. Torres stepped forward through the haze. "You see now, this is us holding back. This is us civilized." Her voice dropped low and sharp. "Do not mistake patience for weakness. Earth doesn't do civilized. Not when pushed." The Council broke. Delegates fell to their knees, begging, bargaining, pleading. Vaynar lowered his head, fissures running deep, and whispered what none of them had ever thought possible: "Name your terms." Torres did not smile. She had no interest in gloating. First, every world will allow unrestricted trade of human coffee. Second, our culture, music, movies, sitcoms will be broadcast without censorship. Third, every council chamber will install pinball machines. O'Connor added cheerfully, "And don't forget Taco Tuesdays. Non-negotiable." No one argued. The council scribbled frantically, ratifying the terms in minutes. They were too shaken to resist, too desperate to cling to pride. When it was done, Torres turned her back on them. "Remember this moment. We warned you once. There will not be a second warning." The humans walked out as they had walked in, music blasting, footsteps loud, leaving the chamber broken in their wake. The delegates sat stunned, their vision of galactic order shattered beyond repair. For the first time, they understood the truth that had been in front of them all along. Humanity was not primitive, not fragile, not waiting to be civilized. Humanity was the storm itself, and the galaxy would forever live under its thunder. Outside, as Earth's delegation boarded their cruiser, Malik muttered, half amused, half grim, "Well, guess the galaxy finally got the uncensored version." Torres glanced back at the glowing chamber behind them. Her face was unreadable, but her voice carried the weight of finality. "And now they'll never forget it." The ship lifted away, leaving the Council staring into the void, haunted by the realization that they had nearly provoked humanity into taking off its mask completely. They had been given mercy disguised as mockery. And the galaxy, forever changed, whispered the words with awe and dread: "Earth doesn't do civilized.